Welcome back to the Railway series Lookback. Today we're looking at the second book in the series, and the stories first incorporated into the television series, Thomas the Tank Engine. We have the same illustration as last time, as will be the case for all of these books, actually, I think. This book was first published in 1946, a year after the first book, which, hey, 80 years next year. Mattel, you better not screw up the 80th anniversary of Thomas next year. Down to mine original? Probably not. We start off with the well-known introduction of Thomas and his features. We learn that while Thomas does work, he is prone to misbehaving. He especially teases Gordon. Also, notice how the narrator uses past tense, implying Thomas has matured since then, which does end up being the case. One day Thomas is doing his usual teasing routine towards Gordon, this occurring while Gordon is resting. Gordon starts brainstorming ways to pay Thomas out. Sometime later, Thomas can't wake up, and his driver and firemen are unable to make him start. Once Thomas does wake up, he goes to the station, where the coaches are angry at him for being so late. Soon the train leaves the station. The train was going too fast for Thomas. This appears to be Gordon's revenge, if you want to call it that. Now, I get that Gordon was tired of Thomas's antics. I would be too. But Jesus, Gordon, I think this might be a little too cruel. The dude is literally out of breath. I mean, Thomas is over here thinking now that he'll never be the same again. However, Thomas has appeared to have learned a valuable lesson, and that is hard work is important. Don't just goof around all the time. They say that Thomas was careful to never be cheeky to Gordon again, but I'm doubtful that he sticks to that. Our next story, Thomas's Train, starts with Thomas complaining about how he is unable to pull passenger trains. Gee, I wonder why. Luckily, the other engines try to bring some common sense to the table, or the shed, saying that Thomas is too impatient, and that he would leave something behind. Foreshadowing. Thomas calls rubbish on these claims, and says that he'll show them. Sometime later, Henry is ill, something that was pretty common for him at the time. Thomas gets the idea that he should pull Henry's train today. Thomas finds the coaches and fusses at them to come along. Thomas's driver tells Thomas to not be impatient, so Thomas surprisingly waits. The fact director is informed that Henry is ill, to which he says to find another engine, to which I read that line in Ringo Starr's voice. Thomas, being the only engine available, is finally given his opportunity to pull a passenger train. However, Thomas gets too excited and doesn't pay attention to his driver, telling him to not be impatient. Thomas starts. People try to get Thomas's attention, but Thomas confuses it for them waving at him. He even ignores a danger sign. Thomas approaches a signalman, who asks Thomas where his coaches are. Thomas looks back and realizes his coaches aren't there anymore. They say here that Thomas was so upset that he nearly cried, which I didn't know an engine could cry, but whatever, don't think too deeply into that. Thomas's driver encourages him to try again. The passengers at the station share to the fact director what a bad railway it was. Which, yeah, the Northwestern Railway does kinda suck. How is it still running? However, Thomas saves the day for once and actually pulls the train. But the other engines tease Thomas about his newfound status as the engine who wanted to pull a train, but forgot the coaches. Our next story is Thomas and the Trucks. One night, Thomas is complaining about how he's tired of pulling coaches, and that he wants to see the world. A line that will be heavily misinterpreted over 70 years later. The other engines, however, don't care. They are clearly tired of Thomas at this point. But here comes Edward, who, vastly unlike the other engines, feels bad for Thomas, and offers Thomas a trade. Tomorrow, Thomas will take Edward's trucks, and Edward will push Thomas's coaches. Thomas agrees. The drivers agree to this trade, and now Thomas has to deal with the dreaded, troublesome trucks. Edward tries to tell Thomas to be careful, but once again, Thomas doesn't listen. Thomas sets off too early. Soon enough, the trucks start teasing and fussing towards Thomas. It gets so extreme that Thomas crashes. Lucky for him that the buffers were there, cause that's what buffers are for, to stop engines from crashing. But unfortunately for Thomas, the fact director was there. He asks Thomas why he came so fast, and Thomas tells the fact director that he was pushed by the trucks, and that he hasn't pulled trucks before. The fact director tells Thomas that he has a lot to learn about how silly trucks are. Our last story is Thomas and the Breakdown Train. One day Thomas is at the yard and hears an engine whistling for help. This engine is James, who is new to the island. But things are not going well for him as his brake blocks are on fire, and he is being pushed by the trucks. And what baffles me is why Sodor still designs trucks with faces. If they didn't do that, a big problem on the island would be solved. Thomas plans to teach the trucks a lesson. Thomas is coupled onto the breakdown train as James crashes at a bend. The driver tells James that it wasn't his fault. It was the fault of the wooden brakes. The Fat Director is so proud of Thomas that he gives him a branch line. The switch up is crazy, especially when Thomas was just being an idiot like a few weeks ago or something. And that was Thomas the Tank Engine. I'm not gonna say I'm a huge fan of this book because, with the exception of the last story, the whole focus is essentially, lol, Thomas is an idiot, am I right? For me, he does too many stupid things in this book for my liking, but there's definitely character growth here, especially considering Thomas's heroic actions at the end, which I guess is the point of the book. How this little blue train learned his lessons and grew up. But I do think the book kinda drags on a little too long with the whole Thomas being an idiot thing, despite it being crucial to the narrative. Overall, I'm gonna give this book a 6 out of 10, which hopefully doesn't make people too mad. And with that said, that concludes this video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Rust out.